Okay, so 5.1, one-to-one functions and inverse functions. This will be day number 1. In this video, you are going to see how do we determine if something is a function, how do we determine if something is a one-to-one function, and also how to find the inverse of a function. Okay, so those 3 things are the 3 topics that you'll see in day 1 video. So let's get started. A little bit of a review. If you take a look, in order for something to be a function, it must pass, in order to be a function, it's got to pass the vertical line test. Hopefully that's a little bit of a review for you. So looking at A, B, and C, can you tell me which of the following are functions? Out of the 3 of those, are they all 3 functions? 2, 1, none? So I want you to kind of circle, box, underline, whatever you want to do, the ones that are functions. And what I notice is letter A is definitely a function, it passes the vertical line test. Letter B is also a function, it passes the vertical line test. Letter C is not a function though. Can you explain why is letter C not a function? Well, it's not a function because there are repeated x values, right? Remember not only do we know it has to pass the vertical line test, but we also know a function cannot have repeated x values. Okay, so important that you remember that. Nice little refresher for you. Okay, so here's a little mini example for you. I think this is going to help you understand what a one-to-one function is. Okay, so let's say I gave you this lottery drawing and I had these 4 people. And in this lottery drawing, these 4 people won these 4 prizes. Okay, so Tommy won $2,000, Jane won the Xbox One, Jim won an iPhone, and Sam won a brand new Audi. Sam's the lucky one, if you ask me. So what I'm telling you is that a function is one-to-one if every element in the range corresponds to only one element of the domain. So think, I know in this one, that would be the domain, right? The people would be the domain. What they won would be the range, which would be their y values. So the people would be x, what they won would be the y values. Here's kind of how I'm going to explain to you what one-to-one means. So I'm telling you that Tommy belongs to the $2,000, and therefore the $2,000 belongs to Tommy. Jane has the Xbox One, and therefore the Xbox One belongs to Jane. So do you see what one-to-one means? It's like, okay, one person can only have one prize. That one prize can only go to that one person. So think, in order for something to be one-to-one, I'd probably write in my notes, not only can't there be repeated x values, but now there also can't be repeated y values. So, therefore, the graph must pass both. The vertical line test is to determine if it's a function. The horizontal line test will determine if it's a one-to-one function. So, make sure it has to pass both of them before you say, yep, it's one-to-one. It's got to pass both the vertical and the horizontal line test. So if I went back to the very first problems that I gave you, let's go back to this one here. Take a look. Well, letter A, yes, it was a function, but it's not one-to-one because if I drew this horizontal line here, do you see how it hits my graph in 2 different spots and therefore it's not one-to-one? Okay, so understand what a one-to-one function is, how it works, how we deal with it, and let's see, hopefully that helped. Okay, so one-to-one, there's how you kind of think about it. Think about the lottery drawing that I gave you there. All right, the second objective, I want you to, I'm telling you, in this first one, let's talk about it. I'm telling you that these 2 functions right here, they are inverses of each other. I'm telling you that. I want you to tell me why they are inverses of each other by doing this XY chart. So if I take these x's and plug them in for x, I take these x's and plug them in for x. Can you tell me what do you get out for your XY chart? And hopefully, once you did that, very simple, I got those values out for my y values in my first one. I got these y values out for my second one. Do you notice anything between these two XY charts? I want you to jot down anything that you notice about these two XY charts, and we'll definitely talk about that in class. But come on, jot some things down. What do you notice? Is there anything that you notice about the two of these? Well, what I notice, very first thing, these x values became these y values. And I think now you're going to see it. These y values became these x values. So to give you a hint, to kind of give you some help, in order to find an inverse of a function, look at what we did. I told you they were inverses. What happened? The x in the original became the y in the inverse, and vice versa. The y in the original became the x in the inverse. So hopefully that's going to help you understand, okay, so to find an inverse of a function, really all I have to do is interchange the x and y values. But watch this. Inverse operations. Think about elementary school. What are inverse operations? Like if I said to you, what's the inverse of multiplication? Well, you would tell me division. What's the inverse of addition? Well, you would tell me subtraction. Oh, now it makes sense. So inverse, doing the opposite. So watch this. In the original, I was adding 3 and multiplying by 2. In the inverse, well, now I'm subtracting 3 and dividing by 2. Oh my goodness, I actually get it. Inverse, undoing or the opposite of what's being done to the original function. Psh, easy, 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 easy. So, let's take a look. What if I tell you that the function, right, this thing here, if a function is 1-to-1, and has ordered pairs a comma b, new notation for you. This is how we write the inverse of functions, f to the negative 1 of x. It's how we write inverse functions. So if f is a 1-to-1 function with ordered pairs a comma b, well then the inverse is also a 1-to-1 function with ordered pairs. Well, think. What did we do here? Well, what we did is we switched the x and the y values, and that kind of gave us our new function. So guess what? I'm going to switch the ordered pairs, and it's going to be b, comma, a. Okay, that's not bad. So think, the range of the original function, all right, let's go back here. The range of the original, right, range is the y value. The range of the original became the domain of the inverse. And vice versa, the domain of the original became the range of the inverse. Okay, so let's go back here. Let's kind of write that. The range of the original, right, this thing here, the range of the original will be the domain of the inverse. Okay, and then number 3, the domain of the original will be the range of the inverse. Okay, so you're simply just switching them to find your inverse. Let's practice. Okay, example 2. The advice I'm going to give you, because every year I see everybody make this mistake. The only way that you can possibly find an inverse is if it is 1 to 1. So it has to be 1 to 1 before you even think about finding the inverse. So think, 1 to 1, what does it mean? Well, it has to pass the vertical and the horizontal line test. No repeated x values, no repeated y values. So if I look at letter A, there are no repeated x values and there are no repeated y values, so I know an inverse exists. Letter B, letter C, well, obviously they're 2 lines, so they pass the vertical and the horizontal line test. So please make sure that they are 1 to 1 before you decide to find the inverse. All right, let's get to it. So letter A, how do I find the inverse of that? Simple. I simply just switch the x and the y values. Okay, so the inverse would look like that. Letter B, how do I find the inverse? Well, think. It's being added by 2 and multiplied by -3. What is the inverse, or what is the opposite of that? Well, I'm going to simply subtract 2 and divide by -3. Voila, there's my inverse. Letter C, same deal. I'm subtracting 5 and multiplying by 2. The inverse, I would add 5 and divide by 2. There would be the inverse of that function. Okay, so a lot to remember with 1 to 1. A lot of things that you can make mistakes on, so please make sure you jot all of that stuff down. What is a 1-to-1 function? Once it's 1 to 1, then you can find the inverse and go from there. Okay, not good job, but great job.